Jack stood in front of his small, quiet cabin on the edge of the colony. The sun had just set, casting long shadows across the barren landscape of the distant planet. His daily routine was simple: wake up, work, and return home. It had been like this for months. The planet was peaceful but lonely. That was until she showed up. At first, Jack thought he saw something moving near his door. He frowned and glanced over, expecting to see an animal. But what he saw was something entirely different. A small figure, no taller than his waist, stood just outside the door. It looked like a wolf, but its body was far too delicate and its fur shimmered with a strange, soft glow. The creature was not of this world. Jack's heart raced. He hadn't seen anything like it before. The little wolf had bright, glowing eyes that locked onto Jack's. It stood still, watching him with an expression that was both curious and cautious. Its fur was soft and silver, and its ears were large, almost like a fox's. Jack couldn't move. There was something about it that made him feel both nervous and oddly drawn to it. "Hey there," Jack muttered softly, unsure of what to do. The wolf girl didn't move at first, just stood in front of the door, her eyes never leaving his. She seemed lost, confused, or perhaps even frightened. Jack slowly reached down to his side, grabbing the piece of bread he had just finished eating. He held it out, hoping to ease the creature's hunger if that's what it needed. "You hungry?" he asked, his voice gentle. To his surprise, the wolf girl took a cautious step forward. She sniffed the air and then, as if deciding it was safe, she moved closer to the bread. She took it from his hand gently, her sharp little teeth just grazing his fingers. Jack smiled at her, feeling an unexpected warmth in his chest. The creature was small, but there was a strength in her presence. She seemed otherworldly. Jack hadn't met any aliens before, but this wolf girl was different from any animal he had seen. As she ate, Jack took a step back. "So, what now?" he asked, mostly to himself. But the wolf girl only looked up at him, her eyes filled with curiosity. She licked her lips as if pleased with the food, then turned her head to look around the small cabin. She seemed to want more than just food. She was interested in Jack, and she wasn't going anywhere. After a few moments, the wolf girl walked to the side of the door, curling up on the ground just outside. Her glowing eyes slowly closed as she lay down, still facing Jack's door. Jack couldn't believe what he was seeing. He had expected the strange creature to run away after getting food, but she seemed content to stay. Confused, Jack shook his head. "Well, I guess you're staying, huh?" He stepped inside the cabin and closed the door, but he left a small crack, so he could still see the wolf girl. As he sat down at the table, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something strange was happening. He had been living on this planet alone for so long, and now, out of nowhere, this tiny, glowing wolf girl appeared at his door. There was something about her that made him feel like she was meant to be there. Hours passed, and the wolf girl did not move from her spot by the door. She remained curled up, her glowing eyes now shut, as if she were sleeping. Jack finally decided to head to bed, but he couldn't help glancing over at the wolf girl one more time. He didn't know why, but something about her made him feel a sense of comfort. Even though she was a stranger, she didn't seem dangerous. There was an almost peaceful energy about her. The next morning, Jack woke up to find the wolf girl still by his door. She hadn't moved an inch, but her eyes were wide open now, watching him. He rubbed his eyes and stretched. "Good morning," he said, feeling a little silly for talking to a creature he didn't know anything about. The wolf girl tilted her head, her ears twitching slightly, but she didn't move. Jack stepped outside, unsure of what to do next. He wanted to help her, but didn't know how. Maybe she was lost. Maybe she was looking for something. He spent the morning working on a few tasks around the cabin, but every time he glanced over, he saw the wolf girl sitting quietly by the door just watching him. It was as if she was waiting for him to make the next move. At midday, Jack decided to try something different. He walked over to her, kneeling down so he could look into her glowing eyes. "What's your name?" he asked softly, his voice barely a whisper. He knew it was a silly question. He didn't expect an answer, but for some reason, it felt right to ask. The wolf girl's eyes blinked slowly, and then, to Jack's surprise, she stood up. She stretched, and then, without hesitation, she walked inside the cabin. Jack's heart skipped a beat. Was she coming in? She moved toward the corner of the room, as if searching for a place to settle down. Jack watched in awe as the small wolf girl curled up in the corner, making herself at home in a way he hadn't expected. Jack sat down at the table, his mind racing. "I don't know what you are," he said quietly, "but I feel like you're here for a reason." The wolf girl yawned and rested her head on her paws, still watching Jack. It was clear that she wasn't just some lost animal. She was something more. For the rest of the day, Jack and the wolf girl stayed in the cabin, her presence quietly comforting him. He didn't know what was going to happen next, but something told him that this strange creature would be by his side for a long time. The next few days passed in a strange, almost peaceful rhythm. Jack woke up to find the tiny wolf girl still curled up by his door, just as she had been the first time. Every day she would sit there, watching him as he worked around the cabin. She never asked for anything, never caused any trouble. She was always there, silent, observant, and loyal. Jack had no idea what to make of it. He had seen animals on this planet before, but nothing like her. The wolf girl was different. There was something intelligent in her eyes, something that made him think she wasn't just an ordinary creature. She didn't act like the wild animals he had encountered. She was something more. One evening, as Jack sat at his desk, studying maps of the colony's surroundings, he heard a soft sound from the doorway. He looked up to see the wolf girl standing there, her head tilted as if she were waiting for him to speak. "Hey," Jack said with a half-smile, setting his work aside. "You want to go outside for a bit?" The wolf girl's ears perked up at the word outside. She took a few steps forward, but Jack noticed something odd. As she moved closer to him, her paws barely made a sound. She seemed almost invisible, as if the very air around her softened her presence. Jack stood up slowly, his curiosity growing. He stepped outside, and the wolf girl followed, her soft steps matching his. The cold wind of the planet's evening brushed against his face as he walked, leading the way to the small garden outside his cabin. Jack had always enjoyed working outside, planting and maintaining the small crops the colony relied on for food. But today, his mind was on the wolf girl. He glanced at her, noticing how she followed him everywhere. She never went too far ahead or behind. She was always by his side. As Jack bent down to check on a few plants, the wolf girl sat beside him, her eyes scanning the surrounding area. Her gaze was sharp, focused. It was as if she could see things that Jack couldn't. He felt the unease growing in his chest. What was she looking for? Why was she so observant? Curiosity finally got the best of him. "Do you understand me?" he asked, not really expecting an answer. He stood up and turned to face her. "What are you? Who are you?" The wolf girl blinked, and for a moment, Jack could have sworn her eyes glowed a little brighter. She didn't answer, of course, but there was something about the way she stared at him that made Jack feel as though she understood more than she let on. Later that evening, as Jack prepared his dinner, the wolf girl curled up by the door, just like always. Jack sat down at the table, his mind racing with questions. He couldn't ignore the fact that something strange was going on. The wolf girl was no ordinary creature. He had felt her power when they were outside, the way she seemed so in tune with everything around her. She wasn't just a lost animal, she was something different. The next morning, Jack decided to search for answers. He rummaged through his cabin, pulling out old records and research documents about the planet. He had read most of them before, but today, he was looking for something specific, something that might explain the Wolfgirl. After hours of searching, Jack found something that made his heart race. It was a report about alien species that had been discovered in the area. Some of the information was familiar, but one section caught his attention. It was about a race of creatures, genetically engineered beings, created to be guardians for humanity in times of need. The report didn't give much detail, but the mention of guardians struck Jack. Could the Wolfgirl be one of these creatures? Was she part of some plan? Something bigger than he could understand? The more Jack read, the more he felt like he was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. He knew the colony was far from Earth, on the edge of space, and that this planet had been mostly unexplored. But was there a connection between the creatures in the report and the Wolfgirl? Jack sat back in his chair, staring at the pages. Could she be a protector? Had she come to him for a reason? And if so, what was her purpose? Suddenly, a soft whine came from the doorway. Jack looked up to see the Wolfgirl standing there, her eyes locked onto him. She seemed to be waiting for something. "Are you trying to tell me something?" Jack asked, his voice low. The Wolfgirl's ears twitched, and she stepped into the cabin. Her gaze never left Jack's, and for the first time, Jack felt as if she was trying to communicate with him in a way words could never express. The tension in the air was palpable. Jack wasn't sure what she wanted, but he could feel the urgency in her presence. She wasn't just waiting around anymore. She was trying to tell him something. Something important. Jack stood up and walked over to her. He crouched down, his face close to hers. "What is it?" he asked softly. To his surprise, the Wolfgirl didn't move away. Instead, she reached out with a paw, gently brushing his hand. It was a small gesture, but it meant something to Jack. She was trying to connect with him in a way he hadn't expected. Jack's heart raced. This was no ordinary creature. There was something about her that was both ancient and powerful. He didn't know what her purpose was, but he knew one thing for sure. She wasn't just a lost animal. She had come to him for a reason, and it was up to Jack to figure out why. As the day wore on, Jack continued to study the old records. He couldn't stop thinking about the Wolfgirl and what she might be. But as nightfall approached, he realized something. The answers weren't in the records. They weren't in the books or the reports. The answers were right in front of him. The Wolfgirl, this mysterious creature, was the key to something much bigger, and Jack was about to find out just how much she had to teach him. The following days brought new changes. Jack noticed that the Wolfgirl was growing more attached to him, and her behavior was becoming more protective. She followed him everywhere, inside the cabin, outside in the garden, even during his short trips to the colony's small marketplace. Her presence was constant, and while it was comforting, Jack couldn't ignore the growing feeling that something was coming, something that would change everything. The colony had always been peaceful. There were no major threats, no signs of danger, but Jack began to sense that the world around him was about to change. It was as if the Wolfgirl knew something he didn't. One evening, as Jack finished his dinner, he heard a strange sound. It wasn't loud, but it was different, like the sound of something shifting, something heavy moving through the air. He looked up, his heart racing. The Wolfgirl was standing by the door, her ears twitching. She was alert, her eyes wide and glowing faintly in the dim light of the cabin. Jack stood up slowly, his instincts kicking in. "What is it?" he whispered. But the Wolfgirl didn't answer. She simply stared at the door, her muscles tensed, ready for action. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from outside. Jack froze. It wasn't a normal noise. Something was happening. Something was wrong. Before he could react, the wolf girl darted toward the door, her movements fast and graceful. She leapt out of the cabin and Jack followed instinctively, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea what was happening, but the urgency in the wolf girl's actions told him it was something important. When Jack stepped outside, he saw it. A small group of alien soldiers had appeared near the edge of the colony, moving quickly toward the settlement. They were unlike anything Jack had seen before. Their armor was dark and sleek, their faces hidden behind helmets. They moved in perfect coordination, like a well-trained unit. The wolf girl was already there, facing the soldiers. She stood her ground, her eyes glowing fiercely, her body low to the ground, ready to spring into action. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. There was no doubt about it. The wolf girl was not just a companion. She was something more. She was a protector. The soldiers didn't seem to notice Jack at first, too focused on the wolf girl standing before them. She was a small creature, but there was something about her that made the soldiers hesitate. Jack watched in awe as the wolf girl bared her teeth and let out a low, threatening growl. She was ready to defend the colony, and Jack could see that she would do whatever it took to protect it. He took a few cautious steps forward, unsure of what to do. The wolf girl turned her head for a brief moment, her glowing eyes meeting his. It was as if she was telling him to stay back, to let her handle it. But Jack couldn't stand by. He couldn't just watch as the wolf girl fought alone. He needed to help her. Taking a deep breath, Jack grabbed a small blaster from inside the cabin. It wasn't much, but it was enough to defend himself if the situation escalated. He stepped closer to the wolf girl, positioning himself behind her. She didn't look at him, but she seemed to understand he was there. She was calm, focused, ready for whatever came next. The soldiers took a step forward, their leader speaking, in a low, harsh tone that Jack couldn't understand. It didn't matter, though. What mattered was that they weren't here for peace. They were here for something else. Without warning, the leader of the soldiers raised his hand, signaling for the others to advance. The wolf girl sprang into action, her body moving with lightning speed. She leapt forward, her powerful legs propelling her through the air. The first soldier was taken by surprise as the wolf girl collided with him, knocking him off his feet. Jack fired his blaster into the air, hoping to create a distraction. The soldiers paused, momentarily thrown off by the sudden attack. But it wasn't enough. The leader shouted something, and the soldiers began to close in on them, their weapons raised. "Stay close!" Jack yelled to the wolf girl, though he knew she didn't need the warning. She was already moving, her movements too fast for Jack to keep up. She darted from soldier to soldier, her glowing eyes fixed on the leader. Jack fired again, this time hitting one of the soldiers in the shoulder. The man staggered back, but he didn't fall. Jack's heart raced. He knew he couldn't fight them alone. He needed the wolf girl's help, but she was already deep in the fight, her small body a blur of speed and strength. The leader of the soldiers stepped forward, his armor reflecting the dim light of the planet's 2 moons. He reached for something. At his side, a weapon unlike any Jack had seen before. It hummed with energy, and Jack could feel the danger it posed. The wolf girl growled and lunged at the leader, but he was faster. He sidestepped her attack and fired his weapon, the blast of energy hitting the wolf girl's side. She yelped in pain, but she didn't stop. She spun around faster than before and charged again. Jack's breath caught in his throat. He had never seen anything so fierce. The wolf girl wasn't just fighting to protect herself. She was fighting for him, for the colony, for everything she cared about. Jack knew he had to do something to help her, or she wouldn't make it. With determination, Jack charged forward, his blaster aimed at the leader. The soldier's weapon crackled with power, but Jack fired first, hitting the leader's weapon and causing it to malfunction. The leader cursed, his focus momentarily broken. In that split second, the wolf girl took advantage. She leapt onto the leader, knocking him to the ground with a loud thud. The soldiers hesitated, watching as their leader struggled beneath the wolf girl's weight. Jack didn't wait. He fired once more, hitting another soldier in the chest. The remaining soldiers looked at each other, realizing they were losing. They turned and fled, retreating into the darkness of the night. The wolf girl stood over the leader, her glowing eyes fixed on him, making sure he wouldn't get up again. She was breathing heavily, her sides heaving from the effort of the fight. Jack rushed to her side, concern flooding through him. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice full of worry. The wolf girl turned her head, meeting Jack's gaze. She gave a small, reassuring whine before she stood up, her body still slightly tense from the fight. She was hurt, but she was alive, and that was all that mattered. Jack breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't know who these soldiers were or why they had come to the colony, but he knew one thing for sure. The wolf girl had saved them all. As the night fell silent again, Jack felt the weight of what had just happened. This was only the beginning. The wolf girl had proven herself to be more than just a companion. She was a protector, and Jack was going to need her by his side more than ever. The night after the attack was filled with uneasy silence. Jack could still hear the sound of the wolf girl's growl in his ears, her fierce determination to protect him and the colony. It had been a close call. The soldiers, whoever they were, had come with a purpose, but they hadn't expected a tiny alien wolf girl to stand in their way. But Jack knew the danger wasn't over. The wolf girl's fight had scared them off, but Jack sensed they wouldn't give up so easily. He had no idea who had sent them or why they'd come after him, but he was certain they'd be back. They always came back. The next morning, Jack couldn't focus. He kept looking out the window, watching the horizon as if expecting another group of soldiers to appear. The wolf girl had settled by the door, her eyes still alert, but she seemed calm, her soft fur moving gently with every breath. Jack knew they couldn't stay on the colony much longer. If those soldiers came back, there would be more fighting, and he didn't want to risk the safety of the others in the settlement. He needed to leave. He needed to get the wolf girl somewhere safe, where they could figure out what to do next. His plan wasn't perfect. In fact, it was risky. But Jack knew he had no choice. He had to act fast before things got worse. Jack decided to head to the nearest settlement, which was a few days' travel away. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was the only option he had. There was a small group of explorers there who could help him, maybe offer protection. They might have some answers about the soldiers and why they were after him. "Come on," Jack said to the wolf girl, gently nudging her awake. "We need to go." She raised her head and looked at him, her glowing eyes full of understanding. She was already on her feet, ready to follow him, just as she always had. The journey was long, and the path wasn't easy. Jack and the wolf girl traveled through rocky terrain where the ground was uneven and the air thin. The wolf girl's keen senses guided them, picking up on sounds and scents that Jack couldn't even begin to notice. It was like she could sense danger before it even arrived. As they walked, Jack couldn't help but think about the wolf girl's mysterious past. She had saved his life more than once, and had protected the colony without hesitation. He knew she wasn't like any other creature he had encountered. She was something more. But what? He had no answers, but he was determined to find them. Whatever the truth was, the wolf girl had a purpose, and Jack was ready to help her fulfill it. The second day of travel was more difficult. They came across a dense forest, the trees tall and thick, blocking out most of the sunlight. It felt like they were walking through a tunnel, the air heavy with moisture and the smell of wet earth. Jack paused for a moment, taking in the surroundings. The path ahead was unclear, and he wasn't sure which direction to take, but the wolf girl seemed to know exactly where to go. She stood still for a moment, her ears twitching as she listened to the sounds of the forest. Then, without a word, She took a step forward, her soft paws making no sound as she moved through the underbrush. Jack followed, trusting her instincts. The forest was quiet, except for the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant call of a bird. But Jack felt the tension in the air. Something was off. As they moved deeper into the forest, Jack suddenly heard a noise, a crackling sound, followed by the unmistakable hum of engines. It was faint at first, but it grew louder as it got closer. Jack's heart skipped a beat. He recognized the sound. The soldiers. The Wolfgirl turned her head sharply, her eyes glowing with alarm. She crouched low to the ground, ready to spring into action. Jack felt his chest tighten. The soldiers were here again, and this time, they weren't alone. Jack grabbed his blaster, his hand trembling. He wasn't sure how many soldiers there were, but he could hear the engines, the low hum of their movement. They were closing in. "Stay close," Jack whispered, to the Wolfgirl, his voice tight. He didn't know if she could hear him over the sound of the engines, but she seemed to understand. She moved closer to him, her body low to the ground, blending into the shadows of the trees. They had to move quickly. Jack glanced around, trying to find a way to escape. There was no time to fight. His only option was to hide and hope the soldiers passed by. He motioned for the Wolfgirl to follow him as he ducked behind a thick tree trunk. They crouched together, watching as the soldiers' vehicles passed, their searchlights scanning the area. Jack held his breath, hoping they wouldn't find them. The vehicles slowed as they approached the area where Jack and the Wolfgirl were hiding. Jack's pulse raced. He could feel the soldiers' presence, could sense how close they were. If they found them, it would be over. Then, just as the soldiers' vehicles passed by, the Wolfgirl leapt into action. She dashed out from behind the tree, moving faster than Jack had ever seen her move before. Her glowing eyes were bright with purpose. She wasn't just running. She was attacking. Jack watched in shock as the Wolfgirl leapt onto the first vehicle, her claws digging into its side. The soldiers inside screamed in surprise as she ripped through the metal, forcing the door open with ease. Before Jack could react, she had disabled the vehicle, taking out two of the soldiers with quick, precise movements. But there was no time to celebrate. Jack quickly ran toward her, firing his blaster at the remaining soldiers who were now scrambling to get out of their vehicles. He shot one and then another, while the Wolfgirl took care of the rest, her agility and strength making her a force to be reckoned with. In minutes, the soldiers were incapacitated, their vehicles disabled, and Jack and the Wolfgirl were safe once more. Breathing heavily, Jack walked over to the Wolfgirl, who was standing proudly beside the wreckage. She was hurt, her side scratched and bruised from the fight, but she seemed unfazed. She looked at Jack with a calm, knowing gaze. "We did it," Jack said, his voice full of disbelief. "We're okay." But deep down, he knew this was just the beginning. There was more to this mission than he had realized. The soldiers weren't just a random threat. They were part of something bigger, and Jack was about to find out just how deep this danger ran. The journey was taking a toll on Jack and the Wolfgirl. They had been on the move for days, constantly on edge, always looking over their shoulders. Despite the success of their last escape, Jack knew they couldn't keep running forever. Eventually, the soldiers would catch up, and if they were going to survive, they needed answers. Jack had always trusted the Wolfgirl, but he had no idea how much she was hiding. Every time he looked at her, he saw a creature of incredible strength and intelligence. But he also saw something more. There was a mystery behind her, something that made her more than just an alien animal, and Jack was determined to figure it out. They had made their way to a small, hidden settlement located deep in the forest. The people there were friendly, offering Jack and the Wolfgirl shelter and food. It was a safe place, at least for now. Jack had learned that the settlers knew very little about the soldiers or why they were after him, but they did know something about genetically engineered beings, like the Wolfgirl. One evening, as they sat by a fire in the settlement, an older man approached Jack. His weathered face showed the signs of many years spent on the edge of space. He had heard about Jack and the wolf girl, and he knew more than he was letting on. "She's not just any creature," the old man said, his voice low and serious. "She's part of a program that was created long before your time." Jack turned to look at the wolf girl. She was lying by the fire, her eyes flicking between Jack and the old man. She seemed to be listening, but there was no sign of surprise. She already knew the truth. The old man continued. "The wolf girl, or whatever you call her, is a protector. She was created by a group of scientists, genetically engineered to guard humans in times of need. A long time ago, the human race feared a war would break out, so they created beings like her to protect you. They were meant to be the last line of defense." Jack's heart raced as he listened. This was more than he had ever imagined. The wolf girl wasn't just a companion. She was a warrior, a being created with a purpose, designed to fight when humanity was in danger. "But why is she with me?" Jack asked, his voice full of confusion. "Why me? What does she want from me?" The old man sighed, looking down at the fire. "That's the part they didn't tell us. You see, the project was abandoned, the records erased. They didn't expect the wolf girls to ever be needed. And for a long time, they weren't. But something happened, something that changed everything. There are others like her, more of these protectors, and they've been activated." Jack stared at the old man, struggling to piece everything together. "So the soldiers we've been running from, they want her? They want all of them?" Old man nodded. "Yes, they're after the protectors, but they don't want them to defend humanity. They want to control them, use them for their own purposes. That's why they've been hunting you both." Jack turned to the wolf girl, who was now sitting up, her eyes full of sorrow. He could feel her pain. She had been a tool, created for a war that had never come. And now, she was being hunted for her power, her abilities. The weight of the truth hit Jack harder than he expected. She had never asked for this. She had never asked to be a weapon. "You don't deserve this," Jack whispered, more to himself than to the wolf girl. "You were just trying to help." The wolf girl nudged his hand gently, offering a small comfort. She didn't need words. Jack could see it in her eyes. She had known the truth all along, and it hadn't changed the way she cared for him. "What do we do now?" Jack asked the old man. The old man looked back at Jack, his expression serious. "You have to stop them. The soldiers, the people who want to control the protectors. If you don't, they'll use them to destroy everything. They'll take everything you care about." Jack swallowed hard. The reality of what he was being asked to do hit him. He wasn't just protecting the wolf girl anymore. He was protecting humanity. He was carrying the weight of something much bigger than himself. "I'll do it," Jack said, his voice firm. "I'll stop them." The old man nodded, his eyes full of understanding. "You're not alone in this. There are others who will help. Others who want to stop the soldiers too. You just have to find them." Jack turned to the wolf girl, who was still watching him with her glowing eyes. She had been created for a purpose, but she had also chosen to protect him. Together, they were a team, and Jack knew that with her by his side, they could face whatever came next. "Let's do this," Jack said to the wolf girl, his heart pounding in his chest. "We're going to make sure they never hurt anyone again." The wolf girl gave a soft whine and then stood up, her tail wagging slightly. She was ready. She was always ready. Jack felt a surge of determination. This was the beginning of something new. He wasn't just running from the soldiers anymore. He was fighting back, and with the wolf girl at his side, he knew they had a chance to win. The day Jack and the wolf girl had been preparing for had finally come. They had gathered what little information they could from the old man and the few settlers who had been willing to help. Jack knew that the time for running was over. Now, it was time to face the soldiers, the ones who had been hunting them for so long. But this time, Jack wasn't going to run. This time, They were going to fight. The small hidden settlement was quiet, the air tense with anticipation. Jack stood at the edge of the clearing, his eyes scanning the horizon. He could feel the weight of the task ahead pressing down on him. The wolf girl was by his side, her fur still bruised from the fight in the forest, but her spirit was unbroken. She was ready. "Are you sure we're ready for this?" Jack asked quietly, his voice full of uncertainty. The wolf girl looked up at him, her glowing eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his heart race. She had never backed down before, and Jack could see that she wasn't going to start now. There was no doubt in her mind. She was ready. Jack took a deep breath. He had come to realize that the wolf girl wasn't just a protector. She was his partner, and they were in this together. He wasn't alone anymore. The sound of engines reached Jack's ears, growing louder as the enemy approached. He could hear the soldiers' vehicles before he could see them, low hums and distant rumbles from the machines that had been tracking them for so long. They were here. Jack quickly motioned for the wolf girl to follow him as he crouched behind a large rock, peering through the trees. The soldiers had arrived in full force, their sleek armored vehicles parked in neat rows. There were at least a dozen of them, armed and ready. Their leader stood at the front, a tall figure in dark armor, his helmet reflecting the light of the twin moons above. Jack could feel his gaze, as if the soldier already knew he was there. "This is it," Jack whispered, gripping his blaster tightly. The wolf girl growled softly, her ears pinned back, but she didn't move. She was waiting for Jack's signal. "Stay close," Jack ordered. He wasn't sure what the plan was, but he knew they had to move fast. The longer they waited, the more chance the soldiers had to prepare for them. Jack took a deep breath and stepped out from behind the cover. He raised his blaster and fired a warning shot into the air. The soldiers immediately turned toward him, their weapons raised, ready to fire. "Jack, get down!" the wolf girl barked, her voice low and fierce. She moved quickly, darting to the side to take cover. Jack followed, diving behind another rock as the soldiers fired. The sound of blaster fire echoed through the clearing, and Jack felt his heart racing. The wolf girl moved like lightning, her body weaving in and out of the trees, attacking the soldiers with sharp, precise movements. She was everywhere at once, a blur of speed and power. Jack fired his blaster again, hitting one of the soldiers in the arm and forcing him to fall back, but there were too many of them. The soldiers were closing in, and Jack knew they had to act fast. He turned to the wolf girl, who was already facing the enemy, her teeth bared in a snarl. She was ready to fight until the very end. "Go for the leader!" Jack shouted. "I'll cover you!" The wolf girl nodded, her eyes locked on the soldier leader. Without hesitation, she sprang forward, her powerful legs carrying her across the field. She was fast. Too fast for the soldiers to react. In a flash, she was on the leader, knocking him off his feet with a single swipe of her claws. Jack continued to cover her, firing at the soldiers who were trying to flank them. One by one, they fell back, but they kept coming undeterred. Jack's arm was starting to ache from the constant firing, but he couldn't stop. He couldn't let the wolf girl face this alone. The leader struggled beneath the wolf girl, his helmet knocked off during the attack. Jack saw his face for the first time, a cold, calculating expression, one that showed no mercy. The leader reached for a weapon on his belt, but before he could pull it out, the wolf girl's claws slammed into his chest, knocking the weapon from his grasp. Jack ran toward them, his legs burning from the sprint. He reached the leader just as the wolf girl lifted him up by the collar of his armor. The leader gasped for air, his eyes wide with fear. "Why are you doing this?" Jack demanded, his voice full of anger. "What do you want from us?" The leader smirked, despite the pain. "You don't understand, do you? The protectors, like her, are not meant to be free. They were made for a purpose. They were meant to serve, not to run wild. We will take them all. And you'll learn what happens when you stand in our way." The wolf girl snarled, her grip tightening on the leader's armor. Jack could see the fury in her eyes. She had been created for a purpose, but she had always fought for what was right. She wasn't a weapon. She was more than that. "You're wrong," Jack said quietly, his voice steady. "She's not a weapon. She's a protector, and she's not serving anyone but herself." With that, Jack stepped forward and delivered a swift punch to the leader's face, knocking him unconscious. The soldiers, seeing their leader defeated, hesitated for a moment. It was all the opening Jack needed. "Retreat!" Jack shouted, signaling. "To the Wolfgirl." The soldiers, now unsure of their next move, began to fall back, scrambling to regroup. Jack knew they wouldn't give up easily, but they had won for now. They had proven that the protectors weren't just tools to be controlled. They were free. The Wolfgirl gave a low growl of satisfaction before turning to Jack. She walked over to him, her glowing eyes softening as she nuzzled him gently. Jack placed a hand on her head, feeling the warmth of her fur. "We did it," Jack said softly, his heart still pounding. "They won't hurt anyone else." As the soldiers retreated into the darkness, Jack and the Wolfgirl stood together, knowing that this battle was only the beginning. But for now, they had won. And that was enough.